Good evening, dear listeners. I'm Lyra Elderwood, and if you're anything like me, you've got a soft spot for stories that shimmer just beneath the surface of history. So find your quiet corner, wrap yourself in something warm, and let your thoughts drift. Tonight's tale begins, as mine often do, with an artifact that remembers more than it should, and a journey that asks more of the heart than the mind. You and I will walk through a portal into London as the great fire spreads, streets choking with chaos, yet hope flickering low within the ash. There, I meet Samuel, a writer who risks everything for memory's sake. By his side, I learn that true courage isn't a grand gesture, but the quiet strength of small, stubborn hearts. And it all begins with a pocket watch in my hand. I remember the first time I brushed soot from its case and lifted it from the vault's velvet cradle. The curators had logged it as part of a parcel recovered from the ruins, a brittle relic of brass and ash. My hands moved with practiced care, the way years in the British Museum had trained me. Yet the moment my fingertips touched the scorched metal, I knew this one was different. It was warm, not the ordinary chill of brass long at rest, but something that held a faint, steady glow beneath the surface. Dust clung to my skin and, with it, a strange intimacy. As though I wasn't just handling history but stepping into its lingering breath. I held still, and then there it came. A low echo, like fire crackling just past the edge of thought. Then came the ticking, not the neat rhythm of a clock keeping order, but uneven, fragile, almost like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Each sound pressed into the silence of the vault. My composure slipped. This wasn't in any manual. No safe handling protocol had prepared me for something alive with memory. The sensation crept up my arm, insistent but gentle, as though the object itself held a story it could no longer keep. In my studies, I had read about the way objects might carry impressions of trauma, the faint shadows of those who touched them in their last desperate hours. Perhaps that was what I felt, but no, this was sharper, closer, too present to dismiss. I realized then the watch had limits. It could not change the past. It only awakened when a story risked fading away, drawing me toward it, urging me to bear witness. The warmth was not fire's blaze, but a stirring, a pulse reminding me of lives that should not be forgotten. Under my palm the brass deepened into a smolder. My breath caught. The sound of rotting timbers filled my ears, and frantic voices lifted inside my head. The sterile stillness of the vault thinned to smoke. The clean stone, the glass cases, they all wavered, then broke apart into drifting cinders. Mist and ash closed in around me, the air thick and unsteady, charged with the weight of something vast. And in that blur of falling soot, I felt the world shift, until I stood on the edge of fire itself, waiting for it to strike. The air hit me first, thick with smoke and the bitter sting of burning pitch. Ash drifted down like black snowflakes, catching on my sleeves, my hair, the uneven cobbles beneath my feet. Overhead, there was no sky, only a swollen, angry red, as if the heavens themselves were set alight. For a moment I could do nothing but stand still, stunned, my modern clothes jarring against the frantic rhythm of 17th century London. People rushed past me in waves. Families dragged children by the hand. Men heaved carts piled tipsy with chairs and sacks of flour. Women clutched bedding or small bundles of clothes. One slipped by close enough that I caught the wide terror in her eyes, a fear so raw I understood without words. The noise was everywhere. Cries, the harsh crackling of flame, and every so often a sickening crash as timber and stone gave way. To my left, a narrow alley spilled orange fire. To my right, the Thames stretched dark and distant, a ribbon of safety far beyond reach. The heat spilled down every street, worse with each breath, and I tasted charred wood, sweat, and salt on my tongue. Buckets of water, flung in desperation, seemed absurd, swallowed by the gale that hurled sparks from one roof to the next. The city's own narrow lanes, its overhanging jettied beams, turned into tinder channels that carried the fire faster than anyone could block. And then I saw it. St. Paul's Cathedral. Its vast dome was lit from within, a lantern of ruin. Flames curled high around its stone, but I could see why the blaze had taken hold so fast. The wooden scaffolding laced around its walls for repairs now roared like a pyre. Even from where I stood, I heard the groans of the straining structure, the sound of a vast body failing. It wasn't the careful lines of an engraving, or a map marked in neat ink. This was the city's heartbreaking, and I was close enough to feel the shudder through the ground. My legs wavered. This was no diary, no tidy reconstruction, but raw history, alive in blood and fire. Loss seeped into every corner, of homes, of voices, of stories that might never be told again. I pressed a hand out for balance, and just as I faltered, someone caught my arm with steady force. I turned, expecting only another panicked stranger, but the eyes I met were clear, smoke-streaked, and focused on something more than escape. His grip anchored me, a still point in ruin, and for a breath, the fire's roar fell away. His fingers were the first thing I noticed, ink ground so deep into the skin it seemed to belong there, staining the lines of his palm as he steadied me. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He didn't even speak my name. His eyes were already fixed on a narrow sharp front, its roof bowing with fire, its windows spitting sparks. "Keep back," he said, voice low, before slipping inside. Curiosity pulled me after him, though I stopped at the doorway. The air inside was dense, full of choking smoke and the smell of scorched wood. Metal types lay scattered like bones across the floor. Sheets of paper curled and blackened in the corners. Yet he moved with urgent precision, stacking ledgers into a crate, sweeping loose pages into tidy piles, rescuing diaries as though they were treasures. Where others carried silver or bread, he carried words. He spoke between the groans of timber, not to me so much as to the air. The Lord Mayor, Sir Thomas Bloodworth, hesitated. He muttered, half a growl, half a prayer. If leaders falter, then these pages must hold the truth. Otherwise, the fire will erase everything but the story they choose to tell. His voice cut sharper than the crack of burning beams. I wanted to answer, but all I could do was watch. His certainty unsettled me. His eyes burned hotter than any flame, a man prepared to risk his life for memories sharper than coins. He reached for a child's charcoal drawing, a few lines of a house, a crooked tree beside it, and he held it close. "This is someone's whole world," he said gently, his thumb brushing the edge so the paper would not tear. The tenderness in that moment pierced me more than the fire ever could. And there I stood, caught, with reason urging me to retreat. This was not my fight. My place was in books and archives, to observe, not to bleed with those who lived it. Yet something stirred. Something I had almost forgotten. The part of me that craved not to catalogue, but to listen, to feel the pulse of history the way it was meant to be felt. Smoke rolled in thicker, pressing against the doorframe. My instinct told me to step back, to leave him to his fate. Instead, I felt myself leaning forward, closer to the heat and the danger, as if drawn not only by the pocket watch pulsing in my hand but by the fire in his. I stepped into the smoke-filled print shop before doubt could stop me. "Let me help," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He lifted his head, startled, but did not refuse. I dropped to my knees among the scattered papers, scanning instead of grabbing. A ledger here, a stack of personal letters there. My hands moved by instinct, sorting not for profit or weight, but for the human pulse written into the ink. His frantic rhythm slowed for a breath as he noticed. For that moment, we understood one another, his urgency and my caution meeting halfway. We worked side by side. His arms reached for anything he could carry. My hands sifted, setting aside only what could not be replaced. "The fire is 2 streets over," I told him, keeping my tone practical. "We take only what survives the carrying." He hesitated, the fight clear in his eyes, but then he nodded. He believed in preserving every mark of ink. I believed in saving only what hands could hold. Together, we found our balance. We packed diaries, letters, rough sketches, anything born from a single voice. He lifted a crate while I pressed another bundle flat. I felt the pocket watch at my side, its weight steady against my hip. When I pulled it free, it glowed faintly, soot-covered metal warming my palm. It tugged at me, not with words, but a gentle pull, pointing me to a tucked sheaf on a sagging shelf, or a journal half buried under boards. That was when I noticed its rule. It could not stop the fire. It could not rebuild ash. But it could give us seconds, just seconds, to pull a page from flame or step across a beam before it fell. A breath of borrowed time, no more. It was small magic, limited magic. But in a crumbling city, small was enough. I matched his pace now, not trailing, not afraid. The weight of the crate in my arms was as firm as my purpose. I was no longer only the careful keeper of broken fragments. I had become part of what we saved. Softly, I realized. I stopped being only the keeper of things. I had become one of the things kept. We slipped back into the alleys, the glow of fire curling high above us, and he led me onward, deeper into the city's shadows. Something waited there. I could feel it, just beyond the next door. Samuel led me down a narrow alley where the firelight dimmed, to a small bakery long since abandoned. The ovens were cold, but the air still smelled faintly of flour. He tapped a pattern on the cellar door, 3 soft, 2 firm, and, after a pause, it creaked open. A cautious eye studied us before the door widened. I ducked into the low cellar, candlelight flickering across rough stone. The smell of flour and wax mingled with something heavier, urgency. When my eyes adjusted, I saw them. A circle of women bent over small desks, quills scratching across paper in a soft, steady chorus. Their calm movements stood against the chaos outside. They weren't fleeing, they were writing. Samuel leaned close, voice low. "The secret network of scribes," he whispered. And I understood. These were women who once copied letters or accounts in quieter days. Now, they wrote of fire and loss, capturing what might never be spoken aloud again. One scribe lifted her head briefly, her eyes watchful. "If they find us," she murmured, "they'll call it sedition." The others did not stop their writing. The pocket watch at my side warmed with a pulse sharper than before, its ticking echoing in the cellar. I moved slowly to a table and glanced at the pages spread across it. A witness describing the collapse of a neighbor's roof, a recipe saved in memory of a family kitchen now gone, a mother writing her daughter's name again and again, afraid it would vanish in smoke. These were not dry records. They were fragments of heartbeats pressed into paper. I knelt to gather the finished sheets and could not help myself. I began sorting. "Place the names together," I suggested gently, showing how pages could be stacked by family or street. "Mark the outside with a word, so each courier knows where it belongs." The nearest scribe watched, hesitant at first, then nodded. Soon, a satchel held the ready accounts, while a small box cradled those still unfinished. A little order inside the ruin. Some voices outside claimed foreigners brought the fire, others called it wrath from God. Pamphlets argued for an accident. I realized these women were protecting a truer record. While leaders and rumor passed blame, these hands gathered lived truth. The faces, the losses, the small mercies, before ash swallowed them whole. The scratch of their quills filled the silence, steady and unyielding. In that chant of ink, the fire above seemed to lose some of its power. And then, one of the women lifted her eyes to me, words trembling at the edge of something more. Anne finally stood, her quill pausing mid-word, and pressed a small leather-bound book into my hands. Her eyes were tired, but steady. "It's all in here," she whispered. I opened it carefully. The pages were filled in a neat, sure hand. Her sister's laughter written down so it might not slip away. The sketch of a bird her daughter loved to watch, and then the sudden turn into fire. Her roof collapsing in the night, the hollow ache of owning nothing but the clothes she wore. They weren't smoothed accounts for clerks, but fragments raw and trembling, the pulse of a life refusing to vanish. I realized then these women were not only preserving facts, they were preserving the textures of life. Recipes, laughter, drawings, losses, in their ink. The fire could not flatten what made them human. Their tools were modest, their rituals simple. Candles no brighter than coals, ink salvaged or traded, scraps of borrowed paper. Yet their strength was in one another. They passed slips of writing through trusted neighbors. They hid pages in flour sacks. They used quiet signals only they understood. It was not a grand rebellion, but it was defiance all the same. I stood among them, listening to the scratch of their quills, and a thought pressed in sharp and clear. Those who are most often overlooked, the quiet ones, the women without titles, were holding the truth of an entire city. Their work was not meant for power or fame. It was for continuity, for the simple claim, we were here, and what we felt mattered. When I looked around the cellar and saw their bowed heads, their hands still moving with steady rhythm, I knew. These women weren't an addition to Samuel's resistance. They were its spine, its steady backbone. Reports would later tally the loss of property or trade, but here, down in this hidden room, souls were being saved in ink that would survive flame. Something shifted in me. This was no longer about simply helping Samuel, or about finding a way home. It was about standing beside them, sheltering the quiet voices that history so easily discards. My purpose merged with theirs. Protection, remembrance, honor. The pocket watch stirred against my thigh once more, warmer, urgent. Its rhythm quickened, promising its strange aid would soon be tested again. The stillness below felt fragile, though above us the fire had yet to relent. Somewhere beyond that cellar door, the city pressed closer, and the air began to change. The gift came suddenly, without warning. The pocket watch flared in my palm, not with heat, but with light, sharp and insistent, its ticking rising until it drowned the fire itself. I gripped it tighter, breath caught, and then the world stopped. Flames froze mid-leap, tons of orange carved against the smoke like brushstrokes on glass. Sparks hung unmoving, each ember a suspended star. Ash drifted around me but did not fall. Even the roar of the blaze vanished, replaced by silence so complete I could hear only the blood in my own ears. A man across the street was caught with his mouth open, a shout trapped, never to escape. I knew then what the watch offered. Not hours, not even minutes, only seconds, a thin bubble of stillness carved out of panic. A breath in which to move where time could not. It was no miracle to undo the fire. It was a fragile reprieve. Samuel's eyes met mine, wide in awe, then sharpened into resolve. Together, we stepped through the frozen moment. Our bodies felt oddly loud against the silence, boots scuffing cobbles that should have echoed, but did not. His gestures were urgent, deliberate. Mine mirrored them. One chance, swiftly taken. The last crate was waiting in the bakery's doorway. I bent and hooked one arm beneath it, muscles straining against the weight that seemed impossibly real inside this painted stillness. Samuel grasped the other side, and together we lifted, weaving carefully past a motionless dog, past the wheel of a cart suspended half-turned. Every step felt monumental, yet it cost us no sound, no heat, no time. We laid the crate down in a sheltered alcove of stone, safe from flame. The moment its base thudded softly against the wall, the world returned. Sound first, a swell of fire and frantic cries. Then motion, sudden and violent. Sparks tumbled to the ground. Heat rushed over me, almost knocking me back. My chest seized as I dragged smoke into my lungs. But the papers were safe. The names and stories within had survived, and that survival carried more weight than I had expected. They felt heavier than they looked, more than ink and paper, each page a rescued heartbeat. I pressed the watch close, feeling its pulse fade back to near silence. It would not grant another pause soon, and I understood its cost. Seconds, not salvation, a finite gift, and with that gift, a harder truth pressed close, because not everything could be saved, and not every choice could be avoided. The air pressed heavily in the cellar, and I felt the weight of decision settle on me. This was the moment I would learn what worth saving truly means. On the desk before us lay two objects. One, a merchant's ledger, its inked columns spelling out debts and trades, the backbone of a fortune. The other, a child's drawing, no more than a smudge of charcoal lines, a crooked house, a round sun, a family of stick figures holding hands. Samuel's hand went first to the ledger. "This proves value," he murmured, as though convincing himself. "Goods, losses, what was owned. Records that rebuild a city." His instinct was practical, logical. The city's officials would lean on such pages when blame and rebuilding began. But my eyes stayed fixed on the drawing. I thought of how future voices might weigh it. A scrawled scrap against a fortune's accounting. Yet wasn't this the heart of memory? I could see the love in the uneven sun, the care in each awkward figure. No book of numbers has this, I said quietly. This is life. Happiness captured before it broke. He hesitated, his fingers resting on the ledger's edge. I stepped closer, voice steadier. You take the ledger if you must. But I'll hold what no sum can measure. My words surprised even me. They carried the certainty I had long buried under caution. For a breath, the room was only smoke and silence. Then Samuel looked at the drawing again. His gaze softened, practical calculation giving way to something deeper, something human. He gave a small, brief nod, stepping back so I could reach forward. I folded the fragile scrap with care, slipping it against my breast. Instantly, the pocket watch in my apron warmed, glowing softly against my ribs. Its pulse told me the truth. This was the choice it recognized. Not wealth or legend proof, but the small, lived essence of a family moment. What endures is not always what builds cities, but what keeps their people whole. From then, our work shifted. We no longer merely reached for ledgers or legal records. We sought the traces of breath and hope. A love note hidden in a Bible. A recipe for cake passed down in a margin. A tiny slip of prayer folded soft with wear. We chose humanity over commerce, heart over monument. Each fragile scrap we lifted from ash felt like a quiet vow. And even as the fire raged above, I felt the truth settle deeper. It is the smallest things that hold the largest weight. Out in the streets, though, new danger stirred. An intrusion that had nothing to do with flame. Two figures appeared ahead, city guards moving slowly through the haze, their silhouettes sharp against the burning sky. Their posture was all duty and suspicion, eyes searching doorways, cellars, any corner that might hide the unauthorized. They were not hunting flames, they were hunting order. And behind one narrow door, the scribes still bent over their pages. If the guards found them, their work would vanish. My chest tightened. Old habits urged me to step back, to vanish into shadow and let others meet fate. But that instinct no longer ruled me. I felt my body move before reason caught up. I stumbled forward, letting myself crumple hard against a broken cart axle. Pain shot through me as my ankle twisted. A cry escaped, part acted, part real. I collapsed directly into their path. The guards stopped short. One scowled, bending toward me with irritation. Up, he ordered. The street's no place for loitering. His words were sharp, clipped. I clutched my ankle, breath quick and uneven, my voice trembling as I whispered about losing my family, about being left behind. The lie was flimsy, and I knew it. Still, I clung to it, forcing myself to meet his frown with wide, frightened eyes. Inside, something whispered, "This is theft. You are stealing their attention." But the trick worked. Their gaze stayed on me. They muttered about curfews, about stragglers, about disorder, yet none of it drifted toward the bakery. From the corner of my vision, I saw it, the cellar door easing open. A dark ripple of motion slipped out, a handful of women carrying satchels close to their chests, the weight of memory cradled like children. They vanished into smoke-filled alleys, nearly silent, safe for now. I dared a glance back. Samuel stood half-shielded behind a crumbling wall, his arms folded tight around one last bundle. But he wasn't watching the women move. He was watching me. His face softened, a small smile curving at the edges of his mouth. Not triumph, not pride, just recognition. A look that said, "I see what you risked. I see what you're becoming." The guards soon waved me off and moved on, bored of my excuses. I rose slowly, wincing at the real throb in my ankle. My breath shuddered, then eased. Relief spread low and quiet, like water sinking into stone. That night taught me something unshakable. History is not only bent by the sweeping decrees of dukes or the failures of mayors. It bends in the smallest of acts, an ankle twisted in the road, a woman choosing to lie, a satchel of paper carried unseen into safety. Threads so fine they seem fragile. Together, they hold the fabric. Later that night, in the dim shelter we found, I would learn how those threads wove into my own story. That night, in the dim hush of our shelter, I unrolled a bundle of pages and began to read. One account in particular stilled me. A woman's voice tracing the moment her house gave way. She wrote of beams snapping like bones, of windows bursting in the heat, of her children's hands clinging tight in the dark. The words were plain, stripped of flourish. But in their honesty I felt something open, as though her fear was my own. I lingered on a single line she had marked twice. I prayed one thing might be spared. That sentence carried more weight than any ledger, more than any plan. Reading it, I realized I wasn't only holding her story. I was being invited into it. I sat silent for a long time, until Samuel noticed. Without a word, he pressed a blank sheet and a quill into my hand. "Write it down," he told me. "What you see, what you feel. Your story matters too." The idea caught sharp in my chest. All my life, I had been an observer, a historian standing outside the fire's circle. But the page in front of me demanded something else. They weren't just recording events, these women. We weren't just copying time. We were finding meaning inside it. The quill scratched, hesitant at first, then steadier. I wrote of the weight of the watch in my palm, how it held warmth like a heartbeat. I wrote of Samuel's voice guiding me through smoke. I let myself note the red sky burning over St. Paul's, and the choice of a child's drawing over a coin. One image, one breath, one sound at a time. Writing changed the chaos into something I could hold. Fear shrank when it had shape. Sorrow loosened when it took words. I discovered myself inside the silence of that scratching quill. He told me to write, and it turned out I already was. I was no longer only a keeper of other people's stories. I was a witness to my own. And as my words joined theirs, one testimony among many, I understood that the watcher's true gift was not time, but voice. In saving the voices of strangers, I had uncovered my own. The watch glowed faintly, a soft reminder against my leg, while the sky outside still quivered with ash. Something was shifting in the night, settling toward the next moment that waited, one marked not by silence, but by promise. The city had grown quiet by degrees, the roar of flame dulled into a heavy hum that lingered in the smoky air. Samuel stood before me, his clothes streaked with soot and ink, his face drawn yet steady. Without a word, he placed a folded sheaf of papers into my hands. His fingertips left smudges on the cover, ghostly gray marks that felt like a signature of the night itself. Inside, I glimpsed a single line written in his rough hand. The fire ran faster than breath, but still we wrote. That glimpse alone was enough. His words carried more than memory. They carried a vow. The sheaf lay heavy in my arms, and I felt both the paper's weight and the gravity of what it meant. These pages weren't made to soothe or decorate. They were meant to endure, to shape the way others would remember not just what was lost, but what refused to be erased. With him, anyone who rebuilt this city would also rebuild its people's voices. This was hope, caught in ink, proof that ruin is never the final word. On my other hand, the pocket watch cooled. Its glow thinned, and the ticking faded, softer with every breath. I lifted it once more and whispered, almost to myself, it had one last duty, and then it fell quiet. I understood then that its magic was woven to limits. It offered only what memory required, never more. Now, it was releasing me. We held each other's gaze for a long moment. He did not speak, nor did I. His eyes were marked with gratitude and with a sorrow that needed no voice. I felt my own reflection in that look. Respect, grief, and a tender recognition of what we had carried through fire together. Closer to my chest, his papers warmed me more steadily than the watch ever had. They were now part of me. I promised myself that I would carry them forward, preserve them as faithfully as he had risked his life to write them. And more, I would write my own account beside his. Not as a distant scholar cataloguing the past, but as a witness who had breathed its smoke and made a choice for the smallest voices. Samuel's sheaf became more than a record of tragedy. It became the proof of resilience, a pledge that even when wood and stone collapsed, stories have the power to rebuild. I held that promise in my hands as the air around me began to shift once again, thinning into a silence that belonged to another place. The vault settles back around me, cool and still. The scent of aged paper greets me, gentle and familiar. The watch lies quiet in my palm now, its work complete. But inside, I feel something glowing steady, warmer than flame. I set Samuel's sheaf on my desk with care. Then I take up my own pen. My hand does not shake. I write, not as an observer looking in, but as a witness who carries voices forward. Every story saved is a seed of renewal, a quiet defiance against forgetting. Let this moment be your last thought before sleep. If you'd like more quiet journeys like this, settle in and subscribe.